we recap and we reset for round 2 of the NBA playoffs. We get into it next on Beyond the Locker Room. Round 2 of the NBA playoffs has been about a week into it. We have the 4 matchups going on. So far, I would say that my early impressions are that these look like they're going to be pretty short series. I think the most compelling one, obviously we'll get into it. First is Timberwolves-Spurs. Honestly, I think this is the most compelling series because just of who's at the center of them. Wemby, Ant-Man. You could say call it the battle for the face of the league type of matchup. And I mean, what I love about Big Vic is in some ways, as much as his game's new school, and in some ways, I think the closest thing I said in the past, everyone says, oh, there's nothing we've ever seen anything like Wemby before. It's like, well, if you've been around the block long enough, you have seen some iteration of it before. And I said before, like if Ralph Sampson's knees didn't go, Ralph Sampson will kind of look like this. But I think he's even a little bit more of a fluid athlete than Sampson. Nonetheless, as young as he is, he's like, 23 years old or something like that. I think to see how mature he is at that age and how he has such a presence about him and a leadership factor about him at such a young age. And them dudes follow him, man, and they follow his lead. And even vets, and that's not easy for that to happen for a young player. And, the question I have, man, is like, are the Spurs ready? And they may be. I think we have to look past the idea of like, a team's too young to kind of go that far and win the whole thing. Well, OKC proved that no. If we have a guy that's kind of entering his prime and the rest of the guys are kids essentially, we can win it. Sprinkling an odd vet here and there, we can win the whole damn thing. And San Antonio's kind of followed a similar model in that sense, where their team's mostly built out of draft picks of their own, or they're out of the draft, I should say. And they have one key trade acquisition. Obviously, the big one for Oklahoma City is the obvious one, SGA. But on the other side, for San Antonio, from their side of things, theirs was Fox. Then also too, they have sprinkled in some vets like Caruso and Hartenstein for OKC. San Antonio has done the same thing with some vets in this case by bringing Cornette in the mix, as well as like Harrison Barnes. So it's a very similar model, similar percentage of young guys versus kind of older guys. And San Antonio, I mean, I think that's the series if you're a Hoops fan, that's what we're waiting for. OKC, San Antonio, they've been like two prize fighters. They've been kind of eyeing each other up all season long. So subliminals, some not so subliminals, going back and forth by the key players. But let's first get through this round. I think Minnesota will still have something to say before this series is out. But the way San Antonio has been so dominant in the second half of the last 2 games, Wemby now starting to really assert himself offensively and he kind of mentioned it too after the press conference after game 1, where he might have overexerted himself on the defensive end. It was an interesting tactic by Minnesota by continuing to attack the rim, kind of forcing him into positions of, challenging, which I'm not saying is wrong. He should be doing so. He's a 7'4" dude. He's damn right he should be doing so. But that effort is like the big man's equivalent to, say, if you have a wing scorer or a guard scorer and you keep posting him up on defense to kind of take his legs out. It was kind of the same approach. He was much more judicious in games 2 and 3. As you see, the block numbers have gone down. He's picking his spots better, pacing himself better. And also, too, the outside jumper seems to be really finding a rhythm with that. Gobert and Minnesota have decided, like, we'll live with that. If he keeps knocking it down at a 40 to 60% clip, I would say Minnesota's going to be in some serious trouble if that's the case. Because if he's knocking that down, he's getting like 3 of those a game. Obviously, at 9 points, he can get the foul line at least about 6 to 8 times. Work out the numbers right there. We're already up to 15 to 17 points right there. And he's going to get a couple of layups and putbacks right there. There's your 23, 24 points. That's just that. Never mind, he's going to get some post-ups down too. So I think he's good for like high 20s to 30s. And if he keeps getting that, then that's an issue. Now, Minnesota has also done as a strategy to try to take Castle out of this series. They've really been attacking him. He's been in foul trouble. Hasn't really gotten his game off as much as I think he would like. They're really playing him physical on both sides of the ball. as I said before, it's forced him in some tough scoring nights, and his offense is a little herky-jerky right now because for the most part he's in fouls. But however, last night I think he found a decent balance. He was, overall, he's plus 17 is the best player on the court when it comes to plus minus. So that tells you that he's kind of figuring things out a bit there. He only had 3 fouls, so now I think there's a correlation between the two in some ways. And he was fantastic. He's right up there. Wemby was a plus 16. So those two dudes, those are the cornerstones of this team, and they did their thing. Last night, Minnesota, they had to get more out of Ant. I think they did get more out of Ant. On their side of things, Ant was 32, 12 of 26, took a lot of shots. Fair enough. He's a minus 10. Also, too, their big three, if you want to call them that, Randall minus 11. Yeesh. That can't happen. To me, that's the key to the series, the Randall-Castle matchup. Minus 15 for McDaniels. Double yikes on that one. So Gobert is a minus 6. So it shows that Gobert, even playing with bench unit guys, he's still kind of elevating them a little bit. When Terrence Shannon was on the floor, he was fantastic. He was plus 19. Naz Reid's a plus 3. So definitely see some type of combination with Shannon Jr., Naz Reid, and Gobert as a troika. And with Ayo as well too. That group seemed to play well together. They got them back in the game. I think that the starting lineups right now, the starting lineup for Minnesota, I have to figure out a way to at least contain San Antonio's starting lineup so they don't kind of I guess you would say it's the third quarter where things kind of got away from them, and that's where Minnesota's going to have to find a way to keep the game close so they can have their closers do their thing late in the game, because Minnesota's a very good team, in my opinion, when it gets into tight situations like that. They have a guy that can close. They have they have 2 guys on this team that could draw a double team. So we'll see where that goes. I feel Minnesota get game 4, but I think San Antonio overall feels like they've got a bit more of a handle on the series, even if it's 2-2 going back to San Antonio. I just feel San Antonio's kind of figured some things out. There's a little bit more of a comfort factor dealing with Minnesota. Sometimes the physicality of Minnesota can shock a team compared to what they were dealing with in the last round. So with no disrespect to Portland, but there's levels to this, man. So that's what I see there. On the other Western Conference series, I'll keep this quick. This is going to be done. I said gentleman sweep on Basketball Rewind for this one. I still stick that. I think LA was frisky enough, but once again, it's one of these things where it reminds me a lot of, for you, some of you old times will get what I'm talking about here. Eastern Conference Finals, I think it's the 91 Eastern Conference Finals, Bulls-Pistons. As a Pistons fan, I definitely can feel the pain right now as I'm about to recall this, but they got swept, and every game was close, competitive in this case, and then Chicago just did a few more plays in the fourth quarter to win. And that's, and even watching that series, you could feel it in this case where it's like, Detroit doesn't have a second year at this point to kind of get over the hump in any game. And it feels the same way with LA. They don't have another gear to get over the hump. They'll play competitive for 3 quarters, 3.5 quarters, but they don't have enough to get over the mountain to get a W. I don't see anything changing on that front. Maybe the home court gets them a win. Someone gets hot, one of the perimeter players starts knocking down some shots. Maybe that's it. Kennard gets hot or something like that. But overall, I don't see this going much further. As I said before, maybe a gentleman's sweep. Maybe LeBron goes for 35 one night and they find a way with a couple bench players to win the eke out a game at home. OKC's known to give up a game as well as OKC is, and how great OKC's been in the last 2-year stretch or 3-year stretch. You want to count the first year. They are known in the playoffs to throw in some eggs or some duds. So if that shooting's not right, from the perimeter, Chet gets to play a little soft, which he has not this year, to give him credit. He's been playing much more forceful, much more physical. Then you have a shot. So it's not possible. OKC, kind of plays with their food a little bit at times. I will say this, though, and I know it's a big topic, the conversation. Here's my thing. And I kind of hinted at this a little bit when I did the Dirty or Reckless pod with Lou Dort and Jokic. I don't usually like talking about referees. I don't like talking about refereeing. I think it's weak sauce. I will say this, though, on this point. And I just said before, I'm a Pistons fan. In this case here, I'm a Raptors fan. I watch plenty of teams in this case have different styles. As a Mavericks fan, they play a little more finesse. Wherever the case may be, whatever style of play your team plays, I just think I would prefer some consistency, let's put it this way, from the referees. And what I mean by that is we can't have it on one end where I see Caruso and Dort just mugging people. They just took their wallet, on like Fifth Avenue, or Young Street. And then afterwards, on the other side, if you even stare too hard at SGA, he's going to the free throw line. Now, does SGA need all that? No, I don't think so. I know in this case, Nick Wright had an episode or podcast the other day talking about what the difference was with SGA compared to other guys that might flop, like Luka or whatever the case would be, is that his rationale is that those guys actually go in to try to score, and then they'll exaggerate, embellish, whatever the case would be. SGA sometimes doesn't even consider that. He's going in trying to draw fouls in some circumstances. I honestly think that's a fair take. I like SGA, and I'm not going to try to give no home cooking because they're Canadian boys or something like that, but SGA sometimes does some real quality Oscar award-winning stuff at times, and he doesn't need to do that, man. He doesn't. And I wish, why I know he doesn't need to do that? Because when he plays for the national team, FIBA doesn't give any of those garbage calls. It was one of the things I do like about FIBA basketball. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the women's game, where it's like, yo, man, you got to fight through that. And for the most part, playoff basketball is like that too, but it does seem to be a bit of a different whistle for him versus almost any other player in these playoffs. Where I'm watching the San Antonio, Minnesota play, and like literally it's hand-to-hand combat. And then come over here, it's like, the night before, it's like, well, what the hell? It's like barely a graze. It's like, oh, what? Like, it's not pleasurable to watch, to be honest with you, having a free throw parade. And I'm not saying that he does it all the time. And I'm not even saying his numbers are that much egregious over anyone else's to some extent. But it's the way. It's like Harden in his prime. It's the way, man. It's the way. And I said before, SGA doing what he's doing, and then on the other side, having Lou Dort and Caruso just mauling wing players and guards at the top of the 3-point line, doing whatever they want. It's like, well, wait one second. Are we watching the same game? Because it can't be the same game. And I think that's the reason why coaches, players that play against OKC get so frustrated. Because there's nothing more than a player hates is an inconsistent whistle. Just tell me what the rules are is coming from a player's side. If we're playing with a quick whistle, so be it. It's a tight whistle today. We're playing with a loose whistle, okay, I'm going to adjust. But we can't have a tight whistle on one end and a loose whistle on the other end. That's the part that gets teams, players, management, wherever, for the opposing side upset. It's not sour grapes, not this and that next thing. Because this is a consistent thing at teams that play OKC. So it's not anything to do with the Lakers per se. I mean, we saw it in the last round, Phoenix. Like, it's a thing that I think that annoys. It does remind me a bit of the Bulls a little bit with Jordan, where Jordan be in the line like 15 times in a game. And it's like, okay, and then it's like the other side, you can't get any calls. He actually has a whistle kind of like an MJ whistle, which is crazy to think, but it's true. But we'll see where things go if they play San Antonio. That'll be fascinating how things are called in that series. Because so far, when they play San Antonio, the perimeter dudes been able to kind of, tenderize him pretty good, and the referees will let it slide. Be it from Castle to Vassell to Johnson to you name it, Harper. Like, they've been kind of putting the wood on him a little bit, and for the most part, it has it's been pretty successful. So we'll see. But OKC should win that series. I said before, SGA, you don't need to do that. I see you play for the Maple Leaf over the offseason, and you'd be playing a different style. You ain't doing that. So, like, come on, man. Enough of that. Anyways, Eastern Conference. Let's get over there. This Knicks series, it's a wrap. Philadelphia, God bless you. With or without Embiid, it might be a little more competitive, but it's a wrap. I won't spend too much time with this. New York has unlocked something with Cat, being the hub of the offense. The ball moves better. Brunson is not dribbling out the clock and dribbling the air out the ball. And it's actually a much more enjoyable game to watch, actually. The only thing my concern with this series is that if Embiid plays the next game, or how many games it lasts, how these two play, it's explosive. Let's put it that way. They both have very similar styles where they can get reckless with the bows, and the faster this series ends from an NBA standpoint, the better, because I don't know, man. The history of these two, it could get explosive very quickly. But I think New York right now has way too many answers. I thought Maxey'd be much more difficult to guard. He has had his way at times, but he has struggled at times too. They're making him take a lot of shots in certain circumstances to kind of get his points, which is what you want. You want to make, top scorers inefficient. Even though last night he was, solid 8 for 12, but once again, they're attacking him defensively. He was a -11. So, and be a -9. Paul George, funny enough, a -4, who I thought has played quite well in the series and probably been the Sixers' most consistent player. The key guy in all this, I think that is right now, where I don't think the moment's got too big for him, but definitely I think New York is actually targeting him more than anyone else, is VJ. His performances in this series have been, for the most part, lukewarm, I would say at best. He had 11 points last night, shot 4 for 9. Like, he needs to be up in the 20 points a game, at least 18 up there to kind of stave off what New York's offering. New York's getting really balanced scoring, which is, as my dad likes to show, he showed me last night. Look at the scoring, the balance. Last night wasn't as balanced as they have been other nights, but nonetheless, 12 for Hart, 23 for Bridges. I think that's the point he's making. 6 for Towns, 33 for Brunson. I think his point is, every night there's another guy, right? So it's not necessarily the Brunson show, even though he was fantastic last night, but it's every night you got Bridges involved with it and Brunson. Maybe it's Brunson and OG. It's Cat and OG. 2 of those 4 dudes are going to do something that night, is what he's saying. And then that third guy comes in. Now tonight, the usual suspects, OG didn't play tonight, so Hart kind of played that role a little bit on that front. And you can see it right here so clear as day. The starting lineup is just killing Philadelphia. Last night, Hart +5, Bridges +15, Brunson +13, Cat +3. And Britt McBride as the replacement for OG -4. He's the only one. So you can see that your typical starting 5 for the Knicks are just destroying Philadelphia, man. So that series, I think, is done. I think by the time I get back on with you guys, that is going to be a wrap. Finally, my Detroit Pistons. Detroit and Cleveland. Honestly, I think this series, we'll see. The game 3 is today. We'll see what it looks like. I don't like the chances for Cleveland because I think certain things about Cleveland are Cleveland. And I think they're too small still in the wings. Detroit has taken advantage of that. They got TV too. They saw what Scotty Barnes and RJ Barrett were doing to Cleveland. They're saying, hell, if them boys doing it, we damn sure can do it. And every big wing we got is feeding right now. Tobias Harris turning back the hands of time. Cade Cunningham out here looking like the best player right now in potentially the playoffs, not named Wembanyama. I mean, you look at, they are Eaton Thompson also has had great moments defensively, of course, and offensively. So any our big wings are just eating up that team. The front court, they're out there putting their chest out against the Raptors like they're a big bunch of tough dudes. Get out here, Cleveland. Ain't no one respecting you for that, man. Please spare me. Anyone respecting Allen and Mobley as tough dudes. Give me the tough guys. And now you're playing against legit tough dudes in B. Stu and Duran. And now all of a sudden, them dudes out here, man, like wallflowers. They can't find these dudes. And I suspect that will continue throughout this series as Duran out here punking these dudes left, right, and center. So I give this maybe 5 games. I think I gave it 5 games initially on Basketball Rewind. My apologies, folks. I think this one's done pretty quickly. We'll find out today if Cleveland has some fight. They do play better at home. Obviously role players play better at home. But I think there's some systemic issues that I think they just can't get around that I think is going to end the series pretty quickly. And we'll see, man. I've been wanting a piece of the Knicks, so hopefully we get a piece of the Knicks. So we'll see. Because as I said before, we left a little something on the bone last year in that series. At least 2 games on that series where I thought that series could have turned around. Anyways, it's been fun, guys. Love the NBA playoffs, as I always say. Once again, you know where to find me on X, Facebook, Instagram, and Blue Sky. You can also find me right here on YouTube, of course, man. Check out the show. Like, comment, share, and subscribe. As I said before, the subscribe is for free. And it's always wonderful to get something for free. As always, folks, be safe out there. Keep it locked. Peace.